everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And tonight, Jeff, we are once again talking about the virtues, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah, I saw this question posted on another chivalric podcast type group where someone asked if chivalry required activism, whether if you consider yourself a chivalric person, are you then, does that exhort you to be an activist? Now, that's a kind of an open phrase. I mean, activist to what?
Yeah, it depends how you define activism, but certainly in the medieval period, and I forget who said it, but he who does most is most worthy.
Yeah.
It was about
Charney.
Yeah, it was about action. That, and I contend my shorthand way of agreeing with that premise is that the virtues are not simply adjectives, they're verbs. Virtues don't, somebody doesn't become adept at the virtues by inaction. You have to actually do something to gain prowess in the virtues, including prowess.
Especially
yeah,
prowess.
they require action, and action is another way of saying activism.
Yeah,
action about what? So we can go through the virtues.
Well, let me throw out a little thing where in the SCA, of course, as knights, we have squires, and I had a squire once who had sort of gone inactive ask me, am I still your squire? And I said to him, squire is a verb also, not just a noun. So you're not my squire, but you're certainly not my squire if you're not squiring. So it's kind of the same thing. I don't think that the virtues must manifest themselves somehow for you to be truly virtuous. If you can't just maintain that all of these virtues are within you if they are never demonstrated.
It reminds me of the story of and it's a period story of the knight who is asked by a woman to dance, and he says, I don't dance. She says, well, then he says, I fight, I don't dance. She says, well, then perhaps we should cover you in grease and put you on a shelf like a piece of armor until you are needed. And she walked away. And the virtues are the same way. You cannot, for example, starting with veritas or honesty, as we talked about in the episode about that particular virtue, it includes not only being honest to other people in your actions and your words, but being honest to yourself and honest to yourself about yourself. So, but honesty is in the word is in structure an adjective, but the act of being honest is action. It requires you to do something. Right. If you stay there silently, well, you can be dishonest through inaction, through silence.
Yes.
So
through omission.
Yeah.
At least.
A lie of omission, sure. And not, so you can't achieve some level of prowess in the virtues without actively pursuing that, without taking action. And you can't maintain them. They are perishable skills, I think, too. Prowess certainly is, but they all take practice and
well, I don't know. they would certainly
attention,
require maintenance.
maintenance. Exactly. Yeah.
You have to, and you can't say you believe in honesty and be dishonest, or the same way you can't say you believe in justice, but not for everybody.
Right.
That isn't
And
justice.
and so to take it into activism or action or both, if you are endeavoring to demonstrate the virtue of honesty, to live by that virtue, and you see dishonesty happening, it is franchise requires you to speak up. When I was a kid, my aunts and uncles, my mother's siblings, would say awful things, and I would speak up and I confront them about it. And my mother said to me, took me aside once and said, you're not going to change their minds. I said, I understand that.
Doesn't matter.
Yes, it does not matter, because if they say these things and I don't speak up, then I'm complicit, and I will not stand by without challenging what they have to say, because that omission on my part would be dishonest.
Right. I may not be able to change their mind, but if they hear it from a dozen people or 100 people, they might.
Maybe.
But if everybody decides, if everybody decides that they as an individual can't change somebody's mind and say nothing, then they will certainly never change their mind.
Right. And sometimes, for example, it's happened to me that somebody will say something online that's wrong or bad or awful, and I will take issue with what they posted, and I'll say something about it. And people have said to me, you're not going to change this person's mind. I say it's the same thing. And in addition, I'm not responding for them. I'm responding for the other people who are watching, who may not have the words to confront this wrong.
Right.
If I have the words to confront this wrong and to articulate why it's wrong, honestly, why this is wrong, then franchise requires me to confront why this is wrong.
And by doing so, in my mind, I've heard,
or I just block them,
Yeah, the courageous thing is to just block them.
Sometimes it's the right thing to do.
So. Well, yeah, it takes a certain amount of fortitude sometimes to not engage.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I've heard it said that I don't post this to convince somebody to change their mind. I post it so that other people who already think that, who agree with me, know they're not alone.
Yes.
And what you were just talking about, I think providing a word, providing an argument, a cohesive argument for those people who might not otherwise be able to articulate it, is in some ways handing them a weapon with which they can defend themselves in the future if they didn't have it before.
Yes. I have at times pointed out the logical fallacies in what somebody is saying, so that other people will recognize those fallacies when they encounter them again.
Right.
But before we move off honesty, I have a question for you.
An honest question.
An honest question. Are you perhaps engaging in an adult beverage this evening? And honestly, what would it be?
Well, an honest question deserves an honest answer. And I am honestly drinking a pre-mixed you're going to love this, salted maple old fashioned from Ironfish Distilleries. Lovely color.
Yeah. Well,
it's okay. I mean, it's very smooth. It's nice, and it's like a cocktail, but you just pour it out of a bottle over ice. And when it's a little, I just got a little pint of it, and it's nice. It's okay. You know,
Okay.
it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna win any awards anywhere, but it's a nondescript sort of after dinner dessert type drink for me.
I have been meaning to try some of the premixed cocktails that seem to have suddenly taken off, probably because a change in regulation allowed that to
Yeah.
occur. But I'm expecting to be disappointed.
Well,
Since
that's the key, is don't set your expectations low and you should be fine. Most of the ones
well,
I've had,
yeah.
I don't care for.
yeah,
This one isn't bad because it's so sort of, I've never had another version of a salted maple old fashioned. So this is okay as far
Okay.
as they go. My sample of one is not so bad.
yeah. I do also, in addition to enjoying the use of fresh ingredients,
Mhm.
freshly squeezed lemon juice and or lime juice and so on, in making a cocktail, I also enjoy the process
Yeah.
of actually mixing a cocktail. So
I don't know how to salt caramel. So I mean, besides the obvious. So
isn't the, you know, the
yes, I don't know
this
what that's,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But why ruin a caramel?
Yeah. So anyway, since you
and
asked,
you are, yes, you are
yes,
drinking. I assumed that you would follow.
yes,
But it looks like a period martini there until you
yeah,
brought
it does until I move it here. I have a Valpolicella from Cecilia Beretta.
that in Germany.
No. Cecilia Beretta Winery is actually not related to the Beretta arms manufacturing company that's been around since the
Just after World War I.
16th century.
Oh no, you're
The
right. They made
oldest arms
howling
manufacturer
pieces.
in the world. And although that holding company does own wineries, this is a different winery and is named after, owned by a different family, named after an renowned 19th century woman. So,
Okay.
but
So how is it?
it's good. It's a
Okay.
Valpolicella. It's dry, little tannic, exactly what I would expect from a Valpolicella.
All right.
So
Well, now that's out of the way.
yes.
That important question has been answered. So as far as I've been thinking about this since we suggested this earlier as a subject, that does chivalry require you to be an activist and when we think of activists, we think of people who go out and raise funds and lead marches and publish essays and for a particular cause. And I don't know that being a chivalric person requires that level of activism, but I think when presented with a situation, it requires you to act locally, so to speak.
It does depend how you define activism.
Yes.
And activism is a very broad term that can encompass lots of different levels of action. So it's certainly, the virtues require action, activity,
Right.
for the good. That can take the form, many of the forms of activism. But behaving honestly, correcting dishonesty, behaving courageously and generously can happen between individuals. It doesn't necessarily have to be on some kind of grand public stage, but it has to be present in your actions with other people.
Okay. Yes, I would agree with that.
So
And I think
Yeah, it
it has,
depends how you define activism.
well, yeah, but I think you said it basically, that you have to be active. Your virtues must be active. You have to
Yes.
activate them.
Yes.
They have to be present in your actions. And those actions can be small. They can be as simple as, taking your grocery cart back to the corral, you know, um, helping
You tell a
somebody
lot
with
about somebody by
that's
whether
right.
they do that or not.
That, how they park is another
Yes.
thing. But, helping, this is kind of Boy Scout stuff, but helping somebody with a heavy package, helping a stranger with a heavy package, something like
And
that.
it is not coincidental that the Boy Scouts have as a
Right.
model virtues, because they were founded by Victorian um, Victorian
Reenactors.
reenactors, neo-medievalists.
Yeah.
So, and the earliest Boy Scout posters showed the Boy Scout with a sort of knight in the background in the clouds, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
Well, that's why that example came to mind, right?
Yep. Courage is another one of the virtues. Well, courage is demonstrated in action, not the two separate words. Courage is demonstrated through action.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's being courageous enough to not speak, not react,
Right.
but to choose
Right.
your action, to hold your action, to consider what consequences, what the end result you want is, and to be courageous enough to delay your own immediate emotional gratification by calling an asshole, and try to work for a more positive outcome that moves forward the greater good.
Yeah. I mean,
so restraint can be a courageous action, but it's still an action.
Yes. It's the difference between, and it may be difficult to discern the difference between restraint and cowardice, but you're right. That's part of what it is. Restraint, I think it's a more of a strategic understanding of your actions.
Mhm.
Sometimes leads you to restraint rather than reaction.
Yep.
So yeah.
And generosity is another virtue.
Yes.
How can you demonstrate the virtue of generosity except through the action of being generous?
Right. Yeah. Same, compassion, mercy, some would say.
Right.
Is another thing that you can't, just thinking quietly to yourself, boy, it'd be great if somebody helped that person. It doesn't demonstrate it, doesn't
Right.
means that you're not demonstrating the virtue.
And so prowess, skill at anything, requires action. Even skill at thinking, prowess at thinking requires you to the action of thought.
Right. Yeah. Again, we talk about maintenance as
right. It's not, yeah, but thinking is not passively reacting to what you see. It's not thinking as an action includes analyzing and researching and discussing and debating and
right.
It's active.
Yes. Yeah, it depends on some people. As for me, certainly part of my thought process is taking a position and then defending it until I realize I shouldn't be defending it and I can't defend it anymore.
Which also takes courage to back down. And there's so many people I see who are so afraid of cognitive dissonance
Mhm.
that they will deny any new information that contradicts what they believe.
I posted a little meme. It just occurred to me one time while I was at work. So I sat down and I created a little graphic and I posted it that said, practice cognitive dissidence.
Yeah.
Question anyone's thinking, question your own thinking.
Yes. Really
That's what
important.
dissidence is, right?
Yeah. I tell my students to question everything, and question the textbooks, question yourself, question each other. Said that I have questioned or disagreed with something on almost every page of almost every textbook I've ever read.
Yeah.
So question everything.
And sometimes the question can just be like, it doesn't have to be, well, I've got to research that. You could say, just hearing someone say, really? Sometimes that's all it takes. Just going to yourself, just saying, I wonder if that's true.
Yes.
But doing it all the time, doing it constantly, so that it eventually, if you keep the question in your mind, eventually the answer is yes, it's true, or no, it's not.
Yes. But, and certainly prowess, the way it's often used as a physical skill, requires action and practice and maintenance. We also have humility. And humility is not, as we've talked about before, is not false modesty. It is an active process of self-assessment of where you honestly are. And the more you know, the more you realize how much there is to know.
Right.
And humility is, you know, people are by now familiar with Dunning-Kruger, and the graph of Dunning-Kruger, where somebody who has a little bit of knowledge overestimates how much they know, and they learn more and tend to underestimate how much they know, and then they actually learn something and can become an expert and realize how much they know, but how much more there is to know.
Right.
And that's humility.
You see that
humility is at the end. You know?
Yeah, when you see that in academia, in some ways, that your expertise gets narrower and narrower. You become an expert in a smaller and smaller band of knowledge, and you have gone deep into this subject, right? Deeper, maybe you have gone deeper than anybody else. But what that means is you've become an expert in this thing. I am the expert in this tiny microcosm of knowledge. But if you've done that study, you recognize that you're walking past other knowledge to get to this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you learn there's so much more. And you've consciously decided, no, I don't have time to learn that because I'm learning this. That's not good or bad. You just recognize it as true.
I do think it's also possible to push forward in multiple areas of your own knowledge and experience.
Oh yeah, sure.
Multiple subject areas. Buckminster Fuller referred to people not as, he said, people will not be generalists, they'll be multi-specialists. They'll have special expertise in multiple areas. And I think that was optimistic.
Well, but again, I think
but also admirable and a goal.
Well, there's certainly, throughout history been polymath geniuses. I mean, we can point to several, but the idea, I think that if you look at it
Please,
as like
please,
a,
humility, I mean,
yeah, okay. That's not false humility. Good for you. Uh, but the idea that if you've got talking about a center and you're looking at one area of expertise, right? And you delve deeper and deeper and deeper, you can branch off into multiple areas, but you can't go as deeply.
right,
You're
right.
if the more
There's
applied
only
you
so
are,
much time. There's only so much
exactly,
time.
exactly. And the more you apply yourself to learning this thing at the expense of, I don't know, other things, yes, the longer that I think of it as sort of rays from a sun, right? The difference
Mhm.
between a laser and a flashlight and a light bulb.
Right.
Um,
So the courtesy, another of the virtues. Well, courtesy is you can't demonstrate, you can't be courteous without
right,
action.
right.
And I think that it's interesting that these are nouns, but they're also, you can say, well, courteousness is an adjective, courtesy is a noun,
Well, courteousness is
honesty,
a noun also.
yeah. So doesn't really matter the linguistics of it. These require action.
Right,
How are you aren't courteous unless you demonstrate it through your actions.
right. You can't
Is a
claim it
is a
if it doesn't
hermit
manifest somehow.
courteous?
Well, they're not discourteous, but this
Yeah.
in this case, the opposite, the antonym doesn't prove the. I'm lost. I
Yeah.
lost
So
myself there for a second.
if somebody never speaks, are going back to honesty, if somebody never speaks, are they honest? No, because they're dishonest through omission by not speaking up.
Could be, yeah.
If somebody never interacts with other people, are they courteous? Well, if they see discourtesy and don't speak up, well, they're not correcting discourtesy, but not speaking to somebody who speaks to you can.
Well,
I'm overcomplicating this. If you're going to be courteous, you have to act in a courteous way.
You have to demonstrate courtesy.
Demonstrate courtesy.
It kind of made, as you were talking, I was thinking of the sort of, you hear of over the centuries of whole sects of religious zealots who mutilate themselves, take vows of silence, whatever, so that they are never, or cloister themselves in communities so that they are not tempted. Which to me says then your faith, you don't believe in your faith enough to be tempted.
Yeah.
Right? That if your faith is strong enough, you can resist temptation. You only want to sequester yourself from temptation if you don't think you can resist it. So where does your faith come in there?
So
it's
go out in the world. Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing. You can't demonstrate courtesy by merely not being discourteous. It's a positive. You
Right.
can't demonstrate a positive by a negative.
I'm suddenly thinking of algebra. So which is
well, a negative times a negative is a positive.
Right, right. But two wrongs don't make a right.
But two lefts do.
I'll have to turn that one over in my head.
It's actually three lefts, I think. Three lefts make a right. But
so, and also make for really challenging dance partner.
True.
So propriety, well, again, it has to be demonstrated in your actions and interactions with other people.
Yes.
Now,
and
moderation.
Judgment.
What's that?
And a certain amount of judgment goes into propriety, of course. You can't, and you have to be able to demonstrate judgment. Well, go ahead. I
Okay.
want to.
So moderation, which is the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you being any form of abstinence is not moderation.
Right.
Any form of excess is not moderation. It's moderation, again, is demonstrated through action.
Right. through discipline and self-control.
Right. Justice has to be active to, and
I think that you can, yeah, you can be just. If your justice is never challenged, it's hard to say someone is unjust. But it requires you to act when injustice is presented to you.
yes, and that is activism.
Yes.
If you see injustice and you're silenced in the face of injustice, you are not just.
Right.
You're complicit in the injustice.
Yes, but again, this doesn't. I don't think it. I don't know that this requires one to march in the streets.
Depends on the situation.
Well, and it depends on the level of injustice, and I guess,
Right,
and
right.
all that. But certainly, if you are going to look at someone from the totality of the chivalric virtues and a person of action in general, one would demonstrate loudly at an injustice, one way or another.
Yeah, it was at a minimum speaking up.
Yes.
But there are many other ways to act with justice. I think of the young woman who videoed on her camera the murder of George Floyd.
Right.
And her action led to justice. So you may not be the person who, and that was an act of courage. That was because she was being challenged, but she demonstrated fortitude, which we'll get to, and persisted. And her action led to justice.
Yeah. Or some justice. I think her courage and fortitude on her part showed more after the incident.
Yeah.
Than even during. Yeah, police were telling her to stop that, don't do that. They were threatening her with arrest at that time, and she kept doing it. But afterwards, she got actual death threats.
Yes.
Credible death threats.
Yeah.
So she maintained, it was kind of too late to do anything, but she stuck by it. She submitted her testimony,
and I think that your people acting justly can be contributing in some way to the advancement of justice. There's something that Hillel said, that that you are not alone responsible for the healing of the world by yourself, but neither are you free to desist from the work. So, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's a translation anyway. So you nobody can accomplish all of this by themselves, but you can't stop anyway.
Right.
So every little effort that everybody takes to the advancement of justice and of the virtues contributes to an overall advancement, just like somebody's advancement of knowledge, the human knowledge in a very small area, in some way advancing that advances the world's knowledge. And the more people that do that, the more the world of knowledge grows.
Right. And that is also, like we said earlier, where if I may not be, me confronting somebody may not change their mind, but 100 people, every time they open their mouth and somebody says, nope, 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 that's sorry, that's wrong, you're wrong. You know, if everybody says, well, I can't do anything, you know, it's like recycling, you know, well, you know, this one can isn't going to make any difference. You're right. But if everybody believed that,
this one vote won't, my one vote won't make a difference.
Right.
Right. Well, vote anyway, right?
Vote anyway. Yeah.
Because it will, if enough people do it. I read a study, the results of a study that showed that the overthrow of despotic regimes has the greatest likelihood of success when at least 3.5% of the population of the country take to the streets and demonstrate in a peaceful way.
Mm-hmm.
Has the highest success in overthrowing despotic regimes. And I figured out that would mean at least 11.5 million people in the United States, which could, I mean, look at what truckers are doing in Canada. And I don't necessarily agree with the reason for that, because they don't want to be, they disagree with the requirement to be vaccinated to drive into and from Canada and the United States. But look at how they're paralyzing the city. Well, but
well, that's a question of, you know, the right 11.5 million people, you know, 11 million people in general. But if it was the right 2 million people, you know, you could force some change.
Yes, but nationwide strike with the shutting things down and persisting for, because some of those persisted for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks until there was some result.
Well, and some of it is we're seeing in the medical professions that it's not even a strike. It's people are just like, you know, we're not going to, it's not even a nationwide thing. I am no longer going to put up with these conditions. Right. I'm going to change how I work. And now it's hospitals are struggling to keep nurses and other, not doctors, but other support, like technicians and stuff, on staff.
Yep.
And, you know,
which in some ways takes us into fortitude, which is demonstrated through action. You can't demonstrate the virtue of fortitude without action, but it also has its limits because people have it takes courage and honesty to say that this is it. This is the limit. Yeah. I have demonstrated fortitude, but no more. No, right. I'm done because the situation isn't changing. I will endure this and endure it and put up with it and persevere. But when there's no indication of change, and I have other options, I will pursue other options.
Right. So, and that's kind of that's the bear of the free market.
Yep.
Right. And this is the complaint that I hear from, you know, nobody wants to work. Well, everybody wants to work, but everybody also wants to be compensated appropriately.
Right.
So there's your free market right there. If you can't hire people unless you're willing to pay them.
And it's the complaints. Well, why should this person doing this job get paid this much when this person with much more training and qualification gets paid the same amount? Well, yeah, that person should get paid more.
Yeah.
So
both of them should get more money.
right.
Both of them should be better compensated for their work. It's we can get into that in the future in our more pointedly political things, but this is, I think, is the central argument of pay inequity.
Right.
That nobody is worth 600 times more than their average employee. Nobody.
Well, and it's, if the efforts of the people making that much money were raising all boats, were
Right.
right, that would be one thing, but it's not. And this has been charted out in lots of graphs. The rise in the number and amount of wealth owned by the 1% versus the how flat or even declining wages are.
But that's another
yes
episode.
So and so that's
Did we get through our list?
Fortitude. We have a couple more.
Okay.
Franchise.
Well,
now,
we talked about that too.
Yes. It's and I believe franchise is the privilege and duty,
yes,
at the same time, to take action. It is based on action.
Franchise is the exercising of
something. The franchise has come to mean the vote, but it's the exercise of that. Loyalty, you can't demonstrate loyalty in the abstract.
Right. Well, it's a kind of a pointless and worthless sort of loyalty.
Right. Right. And finally, sprezzatura, which is the embodiment of all the virtues, but demonstrated, making it look easy, practicing it so well and thoroughly, and practice is an action, practicing it so well that it looks natural. So that obviously takes activity.
Right.
So,
well, this, I've mentioned this before. We talk about whatever you might think of Clint Eastwood and his movies. There's a line from Heartbreak Ridge where he says, if you start, and he wants everybody to wear a uniform. So you start dressing like a Marine, you start acting like a Marine. When you start acting like a Marine, eventually it stopped being an act. The act becomes habitual, and then at some point it stops being an act. It becomes who you are. And that's what we're talking about here, is it?
Yes.
The practicing the virtues, pretending, if you pretend to be courageous long enough, you become courageous.
And I remember many years ago, I asked a friend of mine, said, you seem comfortable in social situations, talking to all sorts of people. You always seem at ease. How do you do that? And she said, I pretend. And if people don't know that I'm pretending, it doesn't matter, because I seem comfortable. And through practice, eventually I became comfortable. And so that, I think that demonstrated a certain amount of courage to act according to that,
well, it
idea.
means you're willing. It means you are willing to remain in an uncomfortable situation long enough to gain a skill. Right.
And so, that stayed with me. And I'll have to thank her again for that, because that was a valuable thing for me.
I mean, it's like combat, like fighting. You know, when you start out, it's uncomfortable. You're wearing all this heavy crap and you're getting hit by somebody, and you know, it's uncomfortable. It's you've got to strengthen your mind to keep yourself there long enough to learn how to be the guy who's hitting.
Yeah.
So
So that's the list of virtues that we have covered. That we operating under, and as and well, and as we said when we first started doing this, there are lists of virtues, many lists of virtues, lists of yes, that overlap, conflict, different ones. So we discussed why these ones, if you want to, go back to the beginning of our podcast before we started doing them on video, and it's in there, the
right.
How we came up with this list, and why, and then episodes about each of the virtues as well.
Yeah, and part of how we came up with this list is applying them in a secular modern
right
mind frame. So because our whole purpose, right, is to say, how does the chivalric virtues work in modern day? Well, we have to look at it in that light.
Yes. So every day, in fact.
Every day, night. Yes.
Nice. Okay.
So is that was our stated purpose? Shall we call that complete for this episode?
I think so.
All right.
And the whole point is that the virtues are not simply a passive list of attributes,
right, that you sort of agree with,
that you cover in grease and put on a shelf until they are needed. It's right. Yeah. So, okay.
And this, we should maybe warn our all 5 of our faithful viewers that we are, part of our reason for doing this episode is to lead us into activism, because we talked about how we believe that activism is important. And if this platform is worth anything, that maybe we need to talk about things that are more important in the real world. So we may begin to do that. So be prepared. Bring notes or take notes. and while we're on the subject, give us some things to talk about.
Yes,
like,
please
share, tell everyone about us if you think they can gain something from it. Everybody can. What am I saying? Everyone can.
Yes. So I think that's this one.
All right. Then until our next episode, be thou
a good night
and true.